And we're live. So just give it a few seconds to. So, Jeff, do you want to give the intro to this and then we'll sort of get into things? I think I'll start it rolling by with the slides whilst you.
All right, this is Man and Machine, episode 2, called The Dating Game, and it originally aired April 12th of 1992. And the basic gist of it is that there's been murders related to, or the victims are people that use this particular computer dating service. So they begin investigating that. Oh, this opening scene. They kind of just put it on here as filler, but it's like we come in the middle of like a hostage situation type of deal where this chick is uh, holding her own boyfriend hostage or has him locked up or something. Anyway, she's got some nice machine guns that keep going off. So we got in our quota of like bullets flying early in the episode. Anyway, I guess this was just sort of to illustrate different things that they were doing, that Eve was doing to utilize her various talents. But anyway, then they start investigating the dating service thing, and then Eve goes undercover, which Mann doesn't think is a good idea, of course, for various reasons. But anyway, as usual, they sort of set it up as there's one sort of likely suspect, but then he's a little too obvious, and then they have the other sort of twist on that later. But anyway, it ended up involving the guys that work for the dating service being the culprits, and then they have kind of an odd ending where he gets electrocuted in a pool. That's the thing that he was doing to the women. Anyway, that's my bad summary of it.
Any sort of comments on what people. I mean, I've got my own thoughts.
Yeah, I didn't write anything down, so you'll probably talk more about that. But one thing that I remembered was I didn't understand really why. And I know it's easy for me to say, but you would think someone with the brain that Eve has would have figured out in the situation she gets into at the end that she should have fully subdued the guy who had the ability not only to kill the guy that had jumped in the pool, but also even her because of the electrocution possibility. They set up that she could be basically killed by the electric effect herself, but she just sort of knocks the guy over and then jumps in the pool instead of fully subduing him, cuffing him or whatever, so that he can't do anything else before she rescues the other guy.
Well, arguably, you could say that there wasn't enough time, and her it was and then obviously we know why, so they could have that a bit of a fight with Bobby.
That was the only thing where it really kind of stretched the credibility, in my opinion, because like I said, I know it's easy for me to say that, but it seems like under the circumstances, at least if she did that, there should have been a line about it. Should have been like, why didn't you fully subdue the suspect before?
Well, we could say maybe I was programmed to take priority of the saving the life.
Right. Yeah.
In that situation.
About that to kind of explain it, but instead it was just sort of left with me saying, "What did she do that for?" Because it's like it's right on the borderline of like the old movies where the audience is yelling at her, don't go through the door, and she does it anyway, in terms of things like that, where you're like, you've got a guy who's already shown that he's crazy enough and willing to kill whoever he needs to, and even can kill the cyborg, and you just kind of toss him aside like, oh, well, this will keep him down for a while. And of course, he immediately bounces back up.
So I've got something to say about because last week we were speculating about why this series wasn't picked up, and I've noticed something that in terms of the quality of the stories, I'll make I have a proposition for you, Jeff. If these first two, these stories that we're seeing in the first two, if you were to remove the science fiction elements and you were to see those plots, would you watch them? Would you thought if like a television series had those kind of plots, but like take away all the sci-fi elements, and it's like, would you think, this isn't good enough? These plots aren't good enough.
I mean, I probably would watch it just because I do, in general, I am attracted to cop shows. And sometimes the dynamic between the partners and then stuff about the cases themselves can interest me. It doesn't mean I won't see the flaws in them, but I could potentially keep watching it. One thing that I thought that even though the first story might have been a little bit more formulaic or maybe predictable, I thought overall it was a little bit more believable. And the other thing I noticed was it seemed like, and I don't know whether they shot them in order or not, but it seemed like Eve was a little bit more robotic in this one than she was in the first one. And it seems like that should have been the other way around. Like they would have had like she sort of has to, kind of loosen up over time. And there were moments in this one that she did, but it seemed like some of the earlier scenes, it was almost as if either it was a different director or somebody who like didn't realize that or something, because it seemed like my first impression was like this episode seems like a little bit more it's the robot and the guy than the first one did. So
yeah.
And I didn't know that was a choice after the fact, like somebody, because a lot of things I know with network TV shows is stuff gets handed down from the network, who barely even watch the shows a lot of the time, and they'll see certain things or hear certain things, and they'll say, "Oh, we need more of this or less of that."
Yeah, and a lot, and certain executives, uncreative executives, and probably trying to justify their position, like making change for change's sake because it's a change that they suggested. Otherwise, if they don't make any suggestions, it's like, why are you here?
So I could see the very same network exec being like, you need to have more scenes of Eve with her hair down, and also she needs to talk a little more robotically. The same person could give both of those notes.
Yeah, I mean, she's like, they'd certainly take advantage of the looks of the actress in this. Yeah, so I was going to say, remember how some of the doctors, where the first story they recorded wasn't their regeneration story, like Peter Davison, the first one he recorded was Four to Doomsday, not his first story. Yeah. So that has been done before, and I think, that's a mistake.
Right. So I didn't know how much, because there are some shows where I know completely, because the setup doesn't require a lot of background, where they shot, say the first 5 or 6 episodes and then decided that the 4th or 5th one they shot was going to be the pilot episode.
Yeah, they did that
They determined that it was the strongest episode they wanted to showcase.
Yeah, so where this completely makes no sense at all is they did it in a series in the 1980s called Jason the Wheeled Warriors. And it really is, it's like the stuff out of nowhere where the characters already know stuff. And it's like, it sounds like the writers have forgotten where they are in the timeline, and like they wrote it like 10 episodes in, and they're saying stuff to each other that they shouldn't know yet. Yeah. And that's really messed up that.
So. Some shows have tried to cover that up by having like either adding text on the screen or voiceover dialogue that paints it as like this is sort of a flashback, because there are times like Saved by the Bell did that, because they had the episode where everybody is like meeting everybody for the first time. They couldn't after, and it was like 15 episodes in or something, so they couldn't just have randomly everybody is meeting each other so they had to say like, oh, I remember the day that I met Slater, and then they had it as a voiceover like flashback thing. And
right.
Homicide did that with when they ran the episodes out of order in the first seasons, because they didn't want to show the episode Night of the Dead Living, where there was mostly everybody in the squad room for the whole episode. They decided that they didn't want that to be like the third episode of the show. So they showed it at the end of the season, and they had the text on the screen that said something like, one day on a hot night last September, or something like that, to explain why why the plot was, like the Adina Watson case, like they were just now just figuring things out in that and stuff like that. So anyway, that's just something one of the methods that they've used to cover up when the network has messed with the order of something.
Well, I think obviously we blame the network for that, but I partly blame the writers for not discussing the order of the episodes beforehand and getting the network to agree with the order of the episodes.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much they did do that, because they could do that and still get overruled. So,
well, if I was in charge of the program, I would like, okay, these are the episodes. Get them to agree. Right, this is what it's going to be.
They ran into that with the Saturday morning cartoons, because basically the creators of those shows were under instructions from the networks: don't make anything that can't be shown out of order, because we are going to show them out of order. It's just we're going to decide, especially in the reruns when we show things, and it's really more based on selling toys,
oh yeah,
that kind of stuff. But anyway, they basically said don't do this, but yet some did it anyway. Because the writers on the show or the producers just like, we think it'll be better if we do this, even if the network screws it up. We're still going to write in things that are, because Ninja Turtles did that quite a bit, where they had. And because the network messed with the order, you had things where an episode would introduce a character that the Turtles were just meeting for the first time, and it was aired, 6 episodes after one where they already knew them and had an adventure with them. So it was like, wait a minute, you already know who that is. Right. That kind of stuff happened all the time.
Yeah, there was like in Star Trek, it was like the reboot at the end of the episodes, and nothing which all this episodic stuff, because as you said, everything was going for syndication, whereas now things have changed because it's DVD and Blu-ray box sets, where people want a little bit of a serial aspect. That whole bit at the beginning, I've got a like the tone of the hostage, like the way they reacted afterwards. I've written here, it was like it was a drill. Like if that was in Homicide, where they've literally been held at gunpoint and then they're so blasé afterwards. Mm-hmm. It's like, was that a drill? Was that like a practice?
That's another thing where I wonder if there was maybe a line that got dropped or something about that, because otherwise it's just basically played for comedy.
Yeah, like the woman, like she ran out of bullets. She ran the mission, she had run, and then she had one of these, like a comedic look on her face. Oh, I've run out. Like, and I was thinking, like, that was badly directed, because like they're all like, the woman comes in, it's like, I mean, you could say Eve doesn't have emotion, but it's like the policewoman comes in, like the police station is like someone's there with a gun, and it's like just like a common occurrence, like everyone's. Yeah, I just felt it didn't seem right tonally. Like they wouldn't react like that.
Most cop shows that are not comedies, they would have had a thing like, you need to take the day off and go see the psychiatrist and all that kind of stuff. It would have been, not just like, oh well, that's over. Now you got other stuff to do.
Yeah, because we've seen a lot of H-lots where like stuff like that lives with the characters. Like remember when they shot up the police department? I know some people died, and like they redecorated the whole thing.
Yeah.
In like for the next season, and like Munch getting he got a little bit ginger when like his friend when we got the shot, and he got a bit. So that was just weird. It seemed like it was tacked on. that. I mean, thematically, it was related to the end in that the woman, like, and she even asked him that the woman was killing the guy that she was like in love with. And
Yeah,
then
set that up, but it was just done really awkwardly. But,
yeah, and it was. I think it was a weak motivation for the guy of, oh, I love these women and I'm gonna kill them because I want to remain like without emotion. And it's like, well, why are you involved in a dating business then?
one thing I heard, though, setting aside the whole concept of how the dating service works, which because of course in 1992 they had yet the term internet was not in common usage, even though the internet did exist. But
but the web was just coming in '92.
So they're still having to try to forecast things, and so of course there's no mention of the internet or the dating thing being something that would be on people's mobile devices or anything like that. But the anachronism I noticed was we talked about last week how they just said it was the quote unquote near future, and they didn't pin down the date because they didn't want to have to be too specific about certain technological developments and stuff. But in this episode, you had the guy, I think it was, I don't remember his name now, but the guy who said that he used to be a football player, he said that he injured it back in 18, which implies that this takes place sometime after 2018, you would assume. But then you have the scene later where the guy brings in like the disc with the background video, and it's on a laser disc, which of course, is you would think, I don't know, at that time.
It's not far off. I mean, Blu-rays still use a laser. It's just
right. It's more
it's in the same ballpark.
The size of it that I noticed, because I'm thinking, that it would be a lot smaller, even if it wasn't entirely like on a like a flash drive type device. It still would be like a much smaller disc, and so that stuck out to me that he had the big disc, because there may have been, again, it's hard to predict those sort of things, because even in my lifetime, the technology is seeming to go back and forth between periods where having a larger version of something is considered the better one, and times where it's been the smallest possible version. So it kind of depends. We've gone back and forth. So maybe they were anticipating, when it came with as far as discs go, there might have been where we did have larger discs in the future. So anyway.
Cameras. So security cameras in television would get smaller and smaller. But then people realized, well, actually, you want them really noticeable so that people change their behavior. So the public cameras are like massive. You are being watched.
But if the guy was in fact talking about 2018, and this is supposed to be, say, in the 2020s, then it actually sort of, in a way,
it's not that far off.
No,
there's a lot of
is that the whole thing with the vinyl records, because she acted like, this is this inefficient system, and most people now would agree with that. But vinyl records sort of made a comeback in that, because of the nostalgia factor. There's a lot of people who like collect them. That after a period of people acting like this is this obsolete thing that nobody wants, at least not younger people, they made a comeback in terms of it being something that younger people actually want to acquire. So the idea that Bobby Mann, as this 30s something guy, would be into collecting the old vinyl, it's not too far, not too unrealistic.
Yeah. So I noticed that there was a bottle of wine with 1996. On it. And so in terms of the AI stuff, it's sort of coming along, like it's coming along in like military stuff, like kind of subtle kind of AI. It's definitely moving forward in terms of like combat robots and things, and even in terms of like the mechanics of getting a robot to actually walk and shoot a gun. It's like, 20 or 30 years from now, you might get, but I don't think you'd get something like Eve in
Merging
30th.
of the military robots with the realistic sex dolls.
Maybe. I mean, especially in Japan.
Come
I mean,
together.
in Japan, they're already doing stuff like that with the sex dolls, with the technology. Also, there's a theme in this of like I've written here. Bobby seems to treat Eve like a daughter, and is like protective of her. And so, how would you feel, Jeff, in his situation, where you've got this partner, you find her attractive, but she's got like the emotional age of 7 years old? What would your sort of instinct be?
I mean, with regards to what?
Well, in how you would treat her.
I mean, it's hard for me to put myself in that context exactly. As far as being like a partner as a police detective, because obviously that's not anywhere close to the job that I have. So, if I thinking about my job, if I was suddenly given her as an assistant, I think we'd have a lot of fun because I would do even more of what he does, where he sort of makes the references to things that he knows she's not going to get. So he kind of
would you make some references up?
Oh, sure. Well, I wouldn't have to do much of that but I liked the fact that they had even though I said that her speech sounded a little more robotic in certain scenes, I liked the fact that there was something where she questioned something, the literal meaning of something, and he said, "Oh, come on, you knew that was a figure of speech," or something like that. So he's kind of viewing it as he's not going to let her use that as an excuse, where it's sort of like, if there's any, kind of a thing there where it's like a crutch of like, well, I can fall back on the, I don't understand this because I'm not human kind of thing. And he's kind of like keeping on our toes like that. Like, I'm not going to let you get away with that. So I liked that.
I mean, I wasn't that much taken with the plot, except the effect of the plot on Eve and what it brought out in her, and then how it's like, and her like in this sort of like boilerplate plot, and her reactions to it was interesting. And then all of this stuff about her saying that she's alone, and even it's a pity she's not here, Ruth, because I suggested that a lot that INT females might relate to what that opening scene about where she felt, oh, she's not compatible with anybody. And a lot of INT females might feel that. Who am I compatible with?
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying last week about, the reasons why the show didn't survive. That I said last week that there may have been some people who thought the show was actually too subtle in various ways because they weren't melodramatic about, despite the sort of more comedic scene at the beginning of this episode. They didn't play up the whole stuff about her emotions, and that part wasn't really played for comedy. The idea of her like not feeling like she matched with anybody or things like that, So again, that's something where some worse shows, would have like made that part goofier. It would have been stressed more. And so again, I said that there's some people that might have thought there wasn't enough sci-fi elements, and other people that thought that those type of elements were not done enough. That it was too straightforward sometimes in the way that, or too subtle.
Yeah, there's like I like that bit where like here where when he said there, no woman is going to trust Mr. Happy here, and then the way she reacted to that, it was almost as if that bit there, a possible motivation for a reaction is that she trusted Mr. Happy, and thus feels she's not a woman by body, even though she shouldn't really have trusted him when she thought that he was a suspect.
Yeah, I didn't take her trusting him as much as I did like she's trying to trust her own instincts in the situation. And so it was sort of like he cut her off of like, I know better than you in this situation. And she was exploring more possibilities of it. So she was kind of...
And sorry for cutting you off. That goes back to the first episode where, remember when she wanted to give up the case when he said no, there's all the stuff with the baseball card, and she thought it was like an obvious setup, and he said no, this is an obvious setup, and then she felt that she'd been hoodwinked by that, and then she felt she wasn't ready, and this is sort of like another one of those instances where he's come out with his hunch, and maybe so it's almost like a thematic callback to that.
Yeah, because it's like the dynamic is, it's like his human instincts are, he's trying to be like, we need to get to the crux of the issue and solve whatever it takes to get the actual case solved as quickly as possible. Whereas because of the way her brain works, she's not as singularly focused. So even though she's still trying to do that, there's like this other element of exploring all of the contingencies or possibilities in whatever is going on.
I saw it as he's got that artisan, cynical mindset about human nature, where it's like in that first example, this is an obvious setup, or here, no woman would trust. I sort of see it like that, like he has an insight into human nature, and she's a bit more naive.
Right. So he's gonna see those things quicker.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily mean he's always right, but he's going to have that instinct quicker.
Yeah, that cynical artisan instinct.
Whereas she's doing it, more computer-like, where it's like go down the list or go through the flow chart. And so it's not necessarily going to occur to her as quickly.
Yeah. But I do think like his like artisan temperament, where it's like, and even with like his cynical nature, even it's like, he's a guy, I was like that, he pretty much said. And it's like suspicious about people's motives. Just that artisan thing of cynical about motives, or I think everybody else is like them.
Yeah.
And he literally does. Like when he thought, you need to be human and have your apartment like this. And you need to have these interests because these are my interests. So there is a bit of that with him where he thinks that a normal human is someone who's like him, like his temperament.
Yeah, and I thought they did an effective job of making each of the, I guess, 3 suspects all kind of creepy, so they don't it doesn't scream like obviously this is the one that's the creepiest of all of them. They're all kind of creepy in different ways.
Yeah.
And for a split second with the girl, like I almost thought it was going to turn out she was the one that was organized.
Yeah, because I was thinking, why are they putting her in this if not to...
Yeah, she might have not been, doing it alone. She might have been the accomplice, but I suddenly had this feeling like her main purpose in that scene was to distract him or to keep him busy.
I mean, he's not got a very... I mean, it's like the whole sort of like scheme of the villain is a little bit like... I mean, how did he think he'd get away with it? I mean, it's all... I mean, like, everyone who's dying who's been to his place, and it's like...
It's another one of those callbacks to the Pemberton crime makes you stupid thing. Like,
yeah.
And the real homicide detectives saying that, more often than not, the reason criminals are caught is because they really don't think out those kind of things. And so they are just...
but we see that, though, in politics, where it's like someone like... Anyway, I won't mention his name, but like certain things where they just do things out of like sheer arrogance, that like they'll just get away with stuff. And arrogance can make you stupid as well.
Yeah, and I think it's just, most of the time in real life, that aspect I think is actually realistic. It's like most people that are like sort of loony killer types, they really don't usually have some great explanation for why they did anything. It's just they were loony. I mean, that's just how they were. So
yeah. So I've got an interesting sort of like question for you.
Okay.
You might find, I think it's interesting. You might find it interesting. How would you? Because I think, what would you think it would be like to combine the elements of this with the elements of H-Lots? I would like her as a character in H-Lots, maybe like put it forward a bit, like, and it's like, oh, Ben, UNT, you want that sci-fi element, but I want some of the characterization that you get in H-Lots.
Well, I mean, if you mean just like set homicide in the future, where you can have like cyborg partners and stuff like that, you know, there's a potential for that sort of idea. I thought for a while that you could take the homicide universe, if you want to call it that, and because it was designed to be based on a real department, you could continue that. You could keep revisiting that for future squads.
Here's the weird thing. In Expanse, Amos Burton comes from Baltimore, and it's like set like 200 or 300 years in the future. And when they went to Baltimore, it just reminded me of Homicide, and like, oh, the criminal activity, and he was this mastermind. And it's like,
I don't remember. I think maybe a video we were doing about something else that I said that, or maybe it was Homicide, but I was saying when they had the more recent riots in Baltimore, I said it would have been great for Homicide to still been around to tackle that, you know, because as soon as all that stuff was breaking out, all I could think of was, you know, like, you know, Lewis going to the scene or whatever, you know, things like that, like stuff that was from the show. I'm like, it just seemed like so it would fit in so well into the established show. So the closest we had, I think, was the episode about the bus driver and the guy that got beaten on the street, you know.
Right, yeah, because that had a racial component to it, because the bus driver was a little bit intolerant, and so it sort of like flamed things. Yeah,
we had the great, you know, sort of back and forth between the white and black characters and stuff, and I thought that all that was done really realistically.
I mean, I think overall the way that H-Lots handled race was brilliant. It was like you got no sense of an agenda from the writers at all, and that they sort of handled it in an even-handed way.
Because
no agenda.
They were consistent about it was about how the character, when they wrote it, it was like, how would this character react to this? What would their justification be? What would be their take on this? And if you do that, and your characters are well established, and you have them react how it makes sense for the character, then it doesn't come off as any kind of agenda or moralizing, because it's just what those characters' perspective is.
Yeah. So I've been,
and that's one positive thing I could say about 2 episodes into Man and Machine. Yes, there are themes, of course, but I don't get the feeling that they are trying to push any particular agenda either. It just seems like they're telling the story with these various elements. To what degree you want to swallow them or not, but there wasn't anything like, you know, this one all about the computer dating. So there wasn't anything that made it seem like they were trying to say that in itself is a horrible idea, or that would always end up with some sort of sinister stuff going on or anything like that. I didn't get that impression at all. So.
I mean, in terms of technology, they had but they've always had this. They've had this for a long time in science fiction, where in the future they will have video calls. And so they had a little bit of that with her having a video call. Where was that? A little bit around here.
Yeah, and that was you know, scene where she tells him, you know, I'll call you when I know where I'm at, and then of course she can't use the phone in the place.
Yeah, and then she's talking to. There we go. There's a bit there where she's talking to Bobby Mann.
Mm-hmm.
And they might have put in a little bit more sci-fi stuff than in with these things where you mix genres or genre, where it's like at the time, because I frequently bring this up, like The Simpsons, where you're writing something that appeals to more than one demographic. Like, you imagine if you've got a whole family watching, you've got something there that's going to appeal to a whole family. And whereas some sci-fi people watching this might think, oh, I want a little bit more sci-fi. And those people who are watching it just for the crime angle, they might be a little bit tougher on the plot and want a little bit more of a sort of a worked out, sort of less formulaic kind of plot.
Yeah, and I can understand that, but I actually sort of appreciate the subtlety, the more realistic approach, because the technology is presented as just being something that's normal to the characters.
Yeah.
And I think that they don't make a big deal of it. They don't have like one huge difference from other shows I could think of is that they don't like zoom in on the technology to be like, hey, look at this fancy technology. It's just presented as this is what is normal for these people in their environment. And
yeah, it was a little bit like the Star Wars approach of the universe of like, this is, whereas Star Trek would focus on the technology, and the technology would be sort of like the plot points.
Yeah, and you'd have to spend a lot of time, like, you mentioned Next Generation earlier. It's like, how much of Next Generation episodes was like Geordi explaining how the technology of the Enterprise worked in that particular episode. Like, he spent so much time with these explanations, which did in fact please a lot the sci-fi nerds because they cared to make that realistic. The concepts came from real scientific concepts. They weren't just gobbledygook. So they wanted to showcase that. But to me, it's sort of like it was a lot of filler because to the time was, and especially the thing that stretched credibility was it was always like some new way they had to use it.
Oh.
As opposed to the way it was designed to be used. It was like, well, if we try this experimental thing, we might be able to use this for, they didn't talk about it as much when it was just the normal thing. And that's the contrast I'm making with the Man and Machine, is that they're not focusing on, other than in the first episode when they first introduced Eve and talked about like how she was an upgrade from these previous, robots or whatever. It's like, they really haven't focused on that as being.
But, yeah, I was just going to say that in say Homicide, like, we noticed that most of the stuff they have is like they have old stuff, so they might have old. We're seeing their old technology because police departments have old stuff.
Well, and that's the irony, of course, about that is that I happen to know, just because of the behind the scenes information, that all of the cop cars that they used on Homicide were the real Baltimore cop cars that had just been retired.
Yeah.
Because they finally got new cars, and so they let them use the old ones.
Yeah. Just in terms of like, did you watch Star Trek Voyager, Jeff?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Ah, right, okay. But I'll just say that
I'm on season 5 of the Next Generation, so I'm still a few years away.
Right. Okay, I won't say anything much. I won't say much about the character. So the character of 7 of 9, I sort of see her as like INTJ, and you can sort of see the difference in sort of interaction style with Eve, who's a lot less confrontational than 7 of 9, more accommodating, sort of more vulnerable in performance. And I think that's sort of something that, because one of the things with Bobby Mann is he does have a kid, doesn't he? He is a father. Yeah. So that might be an element in bringing out his protective side.
Yeah, they specifically mentioned in the first episode that she had like classes to teach her like how to get along with other humans. So she's probably trying to utilize those things and not like be abrasive or rub people the wrong way. She's trying to get along with people.
Yeah, but also just in the way she's acted, like the level of confidence in her is sort of more consistent with INTP than INTJ. Like if you say somebody like Avon, who's like a little bit more caustic in their, like I mean, like she like picked him up when he said something that was figurative, but that was because something was bothering her. So it's almost like, if you want to talk in fiction terms, she's got a little bit of extroverted feeling there in terms of considering people's feelings, in terms of, yes, they've said the wrong thing, but don't mention it. But, like, because David Kersey mentioned something like that, where the rational will let something slide unless they then they'll sort of bring it up. But that's sort of, I suppose, more the mature rational. The younger rational will just sort of like comment on nearly everyone's mistake in order to prove how smart they are, because they want people to acknowledge that they're smart, because that's the thing that they see as their main thing, being smart.
Yeah, as somebody who has experienced immature INTPs, I can say that that definitely don't seem to place much concern about how other people's feelings are affected by things they say.
But that immature INTP that you knew did change over time.
Well, yeah, more than one, but yes, in general, I've that's what I was saying. When they mature, then they start to care more about that. But that's why I was saying, with someone who's characterized as having like the emotional level of a 7-year-old or whatever, which I haven't really seen. It seems like it's more. I'm not sure quite how to characterize that, but it's more just like the social skills are maybe at a low level. But in terms of emotional things, like I said, it's not like she has like tantrums or
no.
things. So, but I would say that that would definitely not be, the behavior of even a very intelligent 7-year-old NTP human would not approach things with that level-headed.
No, they wouldn't. As you said, you've said before that rationals can get very emotional and sort of like show that they're not very good at, controlling their feelings. That I think you said some of the most irrational people you've seen have been irrationals when they're upset.
And usually in defense of their own point of view, whatever it is they're viewing as the superior way of looking at whatever it is, if somebody is not on board with that, then they can react harshly, because it's like, well, you must just be too stupid to understand this, is kind of their attitude.
Yeah. And also they don't live there a lot of times, whereas someone like yourself, you're living more in that area of feelings and emotions. And so it's going to become more nuanced because it's where you live. I've made most of my points. The board is now. But yes, I mean, so I would say a sort of a boilerplate plot. Like I said, if it wasn't her reactions to the plot, if you sort of like take her out of it and it was just like him investigating, it would be a pretty boring plot to me.
Two things that as these pictures went by, I thought, well, like that outfit, they implied in the previous scene, she was dressing for attention, and I'm like, that doesn't look very attention-getting as far as some of the outfits they've already had her wear. Like that particular one is actually pretty conservative.
Yeah, it's like INTP female. Yeah,
the other thing was that, I talked about in the first episode about a couple of kind of subtle joke lines, or that they had in there that were not, again, over the top. But if you're listening, you notice. And the one in this is the picture where he's putting the device in her shirt, and he acts like kind of awkward about it. But then if you notice, he says, "They're perfect. I mean, you're perfect."
Yeah. It's just that little stuff. And then,
shirt.
And then there's a bit here. I mean, look what I mean. There. I mean, did the director have a word about, you'll wear this kind of bra?
Yeah, she's fully anatomically correct with superfluous nipples. Yeah.
Was it cold on set? And then at least you look down.
I say superfluous, maybe we'll have a. That's the thing, is some shows would have taken that entirely different direction. Like there's some sort of a weapon or something like that, like the Austin Powers fembots. Yeah.
So, like I said, her reactions to this sort of boilerplate plot is what was interesting to me. So it does show you how sometimes with a certain genre, like Doctor Who would do it, like it's like they would take like a plot that had been in movies and it would be like their spin on it would sort of like change it up. So
yeah, I would say
again,
the effectiveness of the suspense in this is kind of up and down, but there were definitely moments where I thought they got it really right. And the moment, like I said, where she finds out the phone doesn't work at the place he's taking her to, that's kind of one of those moments you're like, oh, didn't think about that, because again, they've established a setting where we don't have, they're not communicating on any kind of mobile device, or at least there's not one evidence. So it's like that was her only means of communication, and she's just lost it. So
yeah, but really, she should have that built in. But again,
you would think so. You would think there'd be something that even undercover that she'd be able to do without that being necessary. But the fact that it does add an element of suspense to that scene. And then the flip side of that, like, is what I mentioned earlier with the way that the whole time where the dude is holding the gun on her, I'm thinking, okay, we've already established that she can't get killed by just taking bullets, at least not to any general area that a human could. It's possible that if she was shot in the head, it could hit her somewhere that would mess up her circuits or something. But that whole time, where it's like, okay, the suspense of the hostage situation is not him holding the gun on her, because we know that's basically not going to do anything. It's just a matter of the timing of the other elements and the fact that we've established that the pool, when electrified, is dangerous to her. So we're already thinking there's going to be something where he could throw her in the pool. So that's the actual danger. But I'm thinking at the point which she does gain the advantage over him, that's when she needed to completely subdue him. And when she didn't and then left it up to Mann, then that's where I was like, okay, that was just in there to have the scene go longer because it's not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's sort of plausible, though, but yes, they should have put a line in, the immediate priority. They did some things like this with RoboCop, where, like, what was the higher priority in terms of, like, I've got to save this guy that's in the pool, and pool versus.
Cool. There were several episodes of Star Trek Next Generation with Data where they did the same thing, where he basically laid out, like, when he has to prioritize his personal directives of what he's allowed and not allowed to do, what's his first consideration. Because there were multiple times where he basically told someone who was antagonizing him in some way, like, I am prepared to kill you if I have to do that. That's just my last resort. But if the greater good of what I'm trying to accomplish and what my orders are and what I'm supposed to do with my directives, if the only way to accomplish that is for me to kill you, then I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and there's sort of like Asimov stuff. They had stuff in, like, RoboCop where, like, if there's, like, a civilian in the way, and then at one point in it, like, he shoots the guy in the crotch, and these various sort of. But it just sort of, these kind of elements is like the kind of thing that I'd seen quite a lot in, like, these suspense things around this kind of time. But you could also say, Ben, that's part of the genre, that you get this kind of suspense stuff. And a lot of it can just be whether somebody likes the genre or not. Because I remember watching the Homicide episodes where I was thinking, I liked the character elements, but I didn't so much like the crime aspect that much. Mm-hmm. Because but the kind of crime shows that I liked Columbo, but because of the sort of the intellectual thing of sort of like how he works it out.
Yeah, and see, I can enjoy that as well, but I also don't as much as the shows where who the killer is a mystery. So the fact that Columbo always shows you up front who the killer is to me, that formula makes it less interesting.
I also liked his characters as well. Who did somebody suggest? Did you suggest that Columbo might be INTP?
I don't know if I did or
Or
not.
was that somebody else? Or that might have been Sabrina. She might have said. She might have commented on. She might have commented on the first video about. And I thought, well, I don't know about that, but he could be ISTP as well. Columbo.
Yeah. I don't remember what I said about that, but
yeah, even the way she's sort of dressed there. Yeah, so the pretty much the only change I would make to this episode is like the way they react to like the hostage situation. It's like, oh, let's like there's an emotional impact there. It is a significant emotional event when someone comes into the police station with a machine gun. And
yeah, I would either have made it, like you said, like a drill or an exercise, or had something where like some time passes between this and the next thing.
Yeah, not just like 3 seconds and it's like, oh, we've forgotten that. Oh, you've got another case tonight.
Yeah. That seemed a little bit weird.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at least the plot wasn't predictable. You could argue it was over-egged, but it was, for the genre, it was sort of okay. But like I said, it was how the plot affected Eve in terms of all of this stuff about, oh, she was feeling lonely, she wasn't finding compatible with somebody, all of the things with the way that she acted with the guys and her learning stuff. That was all interesting to me. So it was that bit. And plus, so it was that, and plus all of the what she wore as well, with the long hair and other things.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know just how much crossover audience there would have been with Law and Order, because it's almost the exact opposite in terms of it's entirely about the case, and the characters are really just sort of there to further that, and not really. You just sort of learn tidbits about their personalities over time based on what they say in the dialogue to each other while they're working on a case, but it's not the focus at all of the show.
Yeah, so if anyone's listening who's like, Homicide set in the future would be pretty good. Homicide Life on the Street 2050 or something.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that's a show that established the environment so well that, yeah, you could definitely revisit it, especially if you had sort of bridge characters, if you had any of the old guard that were still around, you know.
Yeah, the only problem with something like that is the budget for doing all of the sets and that lot. Because so much of the original, because all of the original Homicide was done on location.
Yeah.
So I noticed they had that problem with Caprica, where it was supposed to be set, where Caprica looked too much like Vancouver, because they couldn't afford to do all the special effects for, well, whilst everyone's out and about. You'll create a whole world. Right then. Jeff, did we actually give the first episode marks out of 10? Or did we forget?
I don't remember doing that.
Oh. I think what I might do is I'll say like 10 out of 10 for the characters and like 7 out of 10 for the plot, and sort of like the same with this, like 10 out of 10 for the character aspect and 7 out of 10 for the plot, because it's really the character of Eve that I'm interested in and the relationship with Bobby.
Yeah. When I do, ratings, is generally, I can really only think of doing it by just my overall enjoyment. So I'd probably give the first episode about an 8 and this one probably a 7. Because the fact that I do still want to see the next one, and I don't know how much that's affected by me knowing there's only 9 episodes. It's possible that does versus a show that, went on for years, because it's possible that I might think they're going to run out of ideas or whatever. But then, this short a time, I figure, well, it'll hold my interest at least that long. But there hasn't been anything that made me like really cringe, like, oh, that was really dumb, or that was, so I figure if there's nothing like that, then I have to rate it in the top half of stuff, because so many, even shows that I like, will still sometimes have moments like that where I'm just like, oh, come on, that even like a show like NYPD Blue had some moments like that. But so far in this, after 2 episodes, there wasn't any point I felt that way. Like I said, my mild criticism with the way that they did the climax of this one was still not enough to say it was done badly. It just seemed like it was slightly wrong or missing something.
Right. So what about from an artisan point of view, from your artisan opinion of the way Bobby Mann was written?
I mean, like I said in the first one, he's very realistic to me. I mean, he just seems like his reactions to things are fairly consistent and believable. So, and I like the fact that he's not portrayed as this over-the-top guy that's overly cocky about everything. Like, he has an ego, but he has reason to. And he basically is saying, look, I have experience with these things. I know how this goes, so this is why I know these things. But as I said in the first episode, he is not afraid to learn things from Eve. That becomes evident. He views her as he does anyone else, a potential that I could get something out of, whatever it may be. So he's not portrayed as if it's just the whole time he's grousing about his robot partner and that's all he can do.
So you sort of like tagged him as an STP, and we're sort of still going with that. And but it's like, pardon?
I just said that's the impression I've gotten.
Yeah. But I sort of like get the maturity aspect from him. Like, he is a father as well, and sort of like his attitude, his protective attitude towards Eve, that sort of goes beyond the stereotype of the STP. Because it's like, this is one of the themes that we've sort of mentioned in the past. Like, we talk about the type, but then the type as a mature version of the type.
Yeah, I think I said last week too, and it's really still hard to tell, like, how much of that is, a protective instinct for her, and how much is just protecting himself. Because there's obviously some of it is that as well.
Yeah. I just think like the things that you've said about like being a parent and how that's changed your outlook, and I think that'll be a bit of that with him.
If I might throw my minuscule amount of Enneagram knowledge into it, I think I mentioned this last week, but I say he definitely comes across as self-preservation type, being his number one thing.
Yeah.
Which is not uncommon for STP personalities. So I think that comes up a lot of that kind of combination.
Yeah, because Right then. So I think maybe we should. So you've given it.
I gave this one a 7. Yeah.
I give this one a 7, and I give it. Well, for the story, I give it a 7. Yeah.
Well, join us next week for, I already forgot the name of it, but
well, I'll have a look. It is No Pain, No Gain.
All right.
All right then.
Bye-bye.